Wow, that was a disappointing episode. No, I'm just kidding. At the very opening scene, did anyone else get a Lost vibe? Starting with such detail and close in on the governor's eye and pulling out. I'm not saying it really means anything, but I got that feeling. I was a little surprised by the jump of the governor torturing Milton. It sort of had to happen because we're at the season finale, and if things don't happen now, they're not going to. But the way that episode 15 ended of this season, the last episode, the governor, though he clearly knew it was Milton, he made it seem as if he wasn't going to act on it. And suddenly this one opens and he's punching Milton in the face. But that's neither here nor there compared to the question that Milton asked the governor, which should have been a highly impactful question, that of what would his daughter, Penny, think of him. The sort of response you could expect from just about everybody in that situation with that question, even from the governor before a couple of episodes ago, would be to be taken back, to be stunted by the question. But not this latest governor, oh no. He not only moved past the question with ease, he answered the part about his daughter's opinion of him, that she would think he's a monster, and didn't even bat an eye. It won't really come as a surprise to anyone who's been watching the show, but that was the final straw for me to know that the governor was an actual monster. Even before the scene after the prison raid, that scene when he answered that his daughter would find him a monster and he was okay with that, that told me that he was finally capable of absolutely everything horrific. Since we're talking about horrific things, I was glad that the governor told Milton to take away all the torture tools, that he wasn't going to need them anymore. Not because I was happier with what ended up occurring, but I was happy that we weren't going to have to experience Andrea being tortured. I just don't know if I could have handled that, and I'm glad it didn't happen. But on that same note, I think there's a twofold reason that he knew he wasn't going to need the torture instruments anymore. One, because he had come up with a new plan for Andrea, and she was no longer going to be a torture candidate. But also, two, I don't think he sees Michonne as a candidate for torture any longer either. Now that the deal with Rick has clearly fallen through, and a bunch of people has died at Merle's hands, get it? Hands? I would guess that he's no longer willing to risk losing the war just to get Michonne to torture her. Better to kill her off if he has the chance, than to try and bring her back. One part I am disappointed about with this episode is Andrea's escape attempt. I know it's on TV and they have to do the dramatic pauses and she's trying to have a discussion with Milton and keep him conscious, but why do they always have to do that thing? And when I say they, I mean those who work in the TV and movie industry, because I've seen this 1,000 times now. Why do they have to do that thing where she takes way too long, while the rest of us, if we were in that situation, would be scrambling as all hell to get those pliers up and to get ourselves free? I hate that bullcrap, especially when it would have meant the difference between life and death. But oh well, it happened, and Andrea is gone. I am, of course, pretty damn sad about this. Andrea wasn't great this season, but in the first 2 seasons she was my second favorite character, second to Shane. And while the show shouldn't really be about having a favorite character, we all do, and it can't be helped. But that's okay, I will definitely keep going on. I still have a great amount of respect for Rick and Daryl and many others, so I'm looking forward to the 4th season. But this episode isn't done yet, hang on. Did anyone else feel like the show tried to pull a switcheroo? They had Carl upset at Rick when I thought they were leaving, and I thought Carl was upset that they were leaving because he wanted to stay and fight. So when the governor's group was going through the prison, I thought there was going to be just an empty prison, and that they were just going to run into walkers, and that's how a lot of them were going to die. Then suddenly there were flashbangs, the governor's group is running for its life, they're getting shot at, and we see Carl, Herschel, and Beth out in the woods waiting in safety, and they stayed entirely, the prison group stayed, to protect their territory and scare off the governor's group, which they had essentially accomplished. And now I want to discuss what Carl had to do in this episode, or what he chose to do, rather, because I don't necessarily disagree with Carl, and I want to know if you guys feel the same way. Carl shot the guy, who was a young guy. He was definitely scared. And Herschel explained to Rick that the guy was giving up his weapon, that he was not a threat. Carl first lied and said that he was still a threat. When Rick found out, he went and talked to Carl and explained that he shouldn't have to do that. Carl then answered about how if you don't kill people, they'll come back to kill you. And he makes a damn fine point. I'm not trying to say I'm one of those people, because one of those people is one of those kind of governor-type people, and I would hope that I am not, and that no one listening to this, or that I know in personal life, is like the governor. But he does have a good point, and it was very reminiscent of what the governor said in the first segment, that you either kill or die and then kill. But regardless of that, that's not the part that I sort of agree with Carl over, because like I said, that would make me a little bit like the governor. The young man that Carl shot was not necessarily giving up his gun. Specifically, Herschel told him to drop the gun, and the kid was not doing it. In fact, I was extremely nervous that he was going to end up shooting at them, either killing Herschel or Beth. He probably sized up the group, a teenage girl without a weapon, an old man on crutches, and a younger kid who probably doesn't have the nerve to shoot. I can fake it and take these guys out. That is the vibe that I got. And despite what we know of what happened, that Herschel said the kid was giving up his gun, I think Carl did the right thing. If he had dropped the gun, absolutely Carl should not have shot him. But he didn't drop the gun. He was holding onto it suspiciously and moving slightly closer. I was glad Carl shot him. Maybe that makes me a complete asshole, I don't know. But I think Carl did the right thing. Not necessarily for the right reasons, but still. I don't even know what to make of the governor's slaughtering of his own citizens. I mean, I know what to make of it. He's an absolute maniac, and this finally proved it. I actually have a friend who argues with me that the governor is not a monster, and hopefully he'll finally come around and see that the governor is a homicidal maniac. But I want to touch on really quickly, because I'm not going to have another episode about The Walking Dead for 6 or 7 months. It's not back until October. The governor said at the beginning of the episode that if he had been the way he is now the entire time, Penny would still be alive. There is some merit to that, and I know some people that think that way and agree, especially in the world that exists now in The Walking Dead, but I still say that peace would have probably been a better option. From the very get-go, the governor wanted to kill off Michonne and use Andrea to get at the prison group for its resources and supplies. From the very get-go, the governor was killing that soldier group, and most likely others, so that he could feel safe. As far as I'm concerned, he never once tried peace. He never once tried to do the better thing. And therefore, there's no way in hell I can agree that if he had been a monster from the beginning, that his daughter, Penny, would still be alive. No way. She would be dead faster. So the governor kills all his people, takes Martinez and the other guy, whose name I unfortunately don't know, and drives off into the sunset. Not really sure what that's about, but I am glad that the governor isn't out of the show. I wouldn't have thought that at first, or I should say I wouldn't have thought that I would have thought that, even though that's a convoluted statement. But after the episode was done, I find myself feeling happy that the governor was still around. I've come to enjoy his character being in the show, and I'm glad he'll be back next season. I just wish we had any sort of inkling as to what he was going to be doing. I don't think he's going to turn a leaf and become a good guy. No, that's not going to happen. I am glad the situation at Woodbury worked out the way that it did, with Rick agreeing to bring back all the peaceful citizens, even though most of them were elderly or young, to the prison. And thankfully that includes Tyrese, Sasha, and that other black-haired lady. But the question is necessary to ask, why wouldn't they stay in Woodbury? And I'm pretty sure I have the answer. It's simply not as secure enough as it needs to be now that their numbers are so dwindled. To have an area as large as Woodbury be secure, they needed all the people that the governor killed off to protect it. Without them, Woodbury is too exposed, not only from biters, but from a returning governor. The prison, on the other hand, they know how to fortify quite well. They know it really well, can come up with attack strategies, even to the point of using the tombs against an attacker. So I think they made the correct choice. In fact, they must have, because otherwise Rick wouldn't have made it. And speaking of the right choice, I still say that I'm correct, that when Laurie appears, it is in short Rick's conscience, telling him he's about to do the wrong thing, or possibly making the wrong choice. And that's why when he brought the Woodbury group back to the prison, Laurie wasn't there when he looked, because he had done the right thing. He was finally on the right path. But of course his bratty bitch of a son wasn't happy about this. I'm not really sure what Carl would have wanted. For Rick to kill everyone at Woodbury, even all the elderly people? That's the way they sure made it seem. And I also forgot to mention about how Carl dropped his father's sheriff badge. As if he was saying, I don't care about doing the right thing anymore. Right and wrong are no longer what's important. I don't want to emulate you any longer. I want to be the ultimate protector, which in his eyes has become someone who acts more like Shane and the governor. I want to quickly mention about what I think is going on between Rick and Michonne. I'm not fully convinced it's a romantic thing yet, but it's at least a bonding thing. I think the two of them are getting along more and more. Although there was a look they sort of shared, and that discussion they had about her joining the group. I don't know, that could be a lead into the next season. I almost became extremely angry at the show, not because Andrea died, but because I thought they did a corny thing and that she wasn't going to. When they ended the scene with the door closed, because it was closed the whole time, and you heard sounds and you didn't know if Andrea made it, that's another thing I hate when TV shows do. It almost made me think that she had to have made it, that the only way they could then make it original and surprise me is if she didn't. Which of course worried me. Then that ended up being what did happen, that Andrea did die, and despite that was a disappointment in a different way, I was no longer disappointed with the creation of the show, or the filming. And finally, we're at the end of the episode. I first want to say that I really loved Michonne in this episode, especially at the end when she broke down upon seeing Andrea's imminent demise, and how she insisted upon staying in the room as Andrea killed herself, and then we even heard her sob after the gunshot. I'm definitely a Michonne fan now, and I can't wait to see her back in the next season, see what she's going to do. I'm also surprised they killed off Andrea from a comic perspective. I haven't read the comics, but I know that Andrea is still alive in them, despite all the time that's gone by. Or at least I'm pretty sure she's still alive. Either way, she lives for quite a long time. And in the show, she's already dead at the end of Season 3. That's, of course, one of the things that makes The Walking Dead great, is that the show and the comic are so different, but it still was a little surprising. There was a great line that Andrea said as she was lying there, that you can't live in this world alone now. And when she says it, she looks right up at Daryl, and he says, you never could. And I think that was a really positive message for her to give upon her death. Especially since Daryl had just lost his brother, and he was still with the group, and admitting that he can't be alone, that no one can be alone if they want to survive. And then the very last thing, the show did an excellent callback when she was asking for a gun to take herself out while she still could. She repeated the line to Rick of, I know how the trigger works. Which, if you don't remember, from the first season when her sister Amy died, she wanted to be there to take her out after she turned. And when Rick tried to approach her to stop her from hanging around her deceased sister's body, Andrea pointed the gun at him and told him she knows how the trigger works. She now got to say the same thing, but it was sorrowful and compelling and touching and very fitting.